Welcome back to another week here at PSU In Focus. My name's Sean. Mike's up here with me, and today we are talking about account size and volume. We're kicking off here in Florida. We're 2 weeks into baseball, and I'm having a good time watching my boys play travel ball. But today we're going to be talking about volume and what we do with the different sizes. So, Mike, where are we talking about there?
If you're just getting started, and this whole series is on getting started, you really need to be aware of account size and volume. And obviously, larger accounts equals more revenue. But let's take a look and let's jump into this. And I'll start it off with what we consider standard accounts or smaller accounts. And this would typically be 8 to 10 teams. And this is the perfect place to start. If if you haven't done a lot of this, um, this is the right size league to start with for your learning environment. It's easier to manage. You can do it without a 6, 8 person crew. So it could typically be you and one or two assistants. If you schedule them properly, easily do it you and one or two assistants. It's going to be a single station setup. So in other words, one tent for individuals, and you could either, if you schedule them right, you could do the individuals and be the team photographer. The good thing is, at least in our world, the good thing is the smaller accounts or smaller leagues are typically done on weeknights. So the bigger leagues are reserved for weekends, and the smaller leagues are, we can go out and do these an hour and a half, hour and a half, depending on how many teams there are. So it's really low overhead, good margin, and these are typically weeknight jobs, not weekend jobs. So small leagues, um, like high school would be spring sports, where you're doing all the spring sports at the same time. But a great place to start.
Yeah, you definitely don't wanna jump straight into this one, which is the high volume accounts. That is not a good place to start. If you're just getting started, uh, do not try to tackle a 30 to 200 team league right away unless you really know what you're doing. You've got your things down, your logistics down, your strategies down. There's a lot of things you're going to learn with those small accounts that help you be successful with the 30 to 200 teams. And when we say 30 to 200 teams, we're really talking about those big leagues. And depending on where you're at geographically, you know, I know that when like we were in Kentucky and I was managing that studio there, um, our leagues in our local town were very small. 30 may have been the max number of teams. So a lot of times we traveled outside of our range to get to those bigger 200 or so team leagues. So you might want to take a look at that and see what's a little bit outside your area because it sometimes is worth it, especially if you're in a dead, if you have dead time to fill up outside of your area a little bit. But just remember, this is going to be a full crew. You're looking at 5 to 6 people at least on staff, and when you're looking at booking these leagues, make sure you have the staff. We'll talk about the common mistakes at the end, but, you wanna make sure that you're looking at that. You gotta manage the logistics properly, and we're looking at about 15 minutes a team on these, may not take that long. Typically, we were, in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 minutes a team, but you wanna have that buffer because you don't wanna be behind, especially on a big league, because that can kill your, chances of retaining it.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add is that the management of the job and the workflow before the shoot, during the shoot, and after the shoot is probably more important than the photography. Obviously, you have to do a good job with photography, but the logistics management is so critical here of, getting stuff in to the league on time, organizing your shoot properly where the kids flow in, they go to the team photographer, get their team photography done, and just a coordination of the workflow of getting it to the lab, getting it printed, getting it delivered back is you have to be really organized to pull off these big shoots. It's really critical.
Yeah, and that's
So
another good
systems
point
is
about. I was gonna say that's another good point about what we talked about in the first one, which was do the small shoots, get those strategies down so that when you get to this, you've got them figured out. Don't try to learn it on this job.
Yeah, systems is more important than talent when it comes to high volume accounts. You've got to have the systems. So this is a natural progression of getting started in this business is start don't start with the largest league in your area. You know, if your kid's on a league that has 60 or 70 teams and you've got a foot in the board in the door because you're on the board, don't do that. Don't start with a league that has 50 or 60 teams if you have never done a job like this. So start small. You know, this is a natural progression of start small, learn what you're doing, grow into medium-sized accounts, and then when you feel ready, jump into the large accounts. Like I said, it's when we talked about it in the last lesson, the compounding effect of retaining these accounts and adding on is really critical for your business. And if you get a 60 team league and you don't do a good job, you're not going to book it. And it's going to be years before you have another shot at it. So don't
Yeah,
start
and
with the
it's
big
gonna
one.
spread. It's gonna spread too. I mean, you screw up that league. For one, if you're on, like you said, if you're on the board or have the foot in the door, now you close the door, but you may have damaged your reputation across the board. So, when we say start small, we're not just trying to be cautious. We're telling you that, it's damaging if you try to tackle one of these big ones. And I can't tell you how many times I've talked to photographers who have just got it started and they've called up and they said, "Oh my gosh, I have a hundred teams shoot this weekend. What do I do?" That you don't want to be in that position. That is putting the cart before the horse, is so we say, and you do not want to do that for sure.
Yeah, and a lot of these coaches and the board members as well, the coaches are coaching baseball, a lot of them are coaching football. The board members, these are active parents. All of these leagues are run by volunteers. So if you mess up with this one in baseball, that's going to probably follow you into football because the coaches and are the same coaches in a lot of cases. Board members are the same. So you know, I guess the point is start small and grow, and that's really the goal here. So yeah, one of the things that we saw the common mistakes is we mentioned this before, but it's jumping into these large leagues before you're ready, and I've seen it multiple times. I had a photographer that was just getting started and really pumped, really excited, and wanted. He was using a lab at the time, and he called me at 9 o'clock one night and so excited. I just booked my first league. And, congratulations. How big was it? 4,000 kids. Okay. And it's like, I didn't even know they made them that big. We don't have a football league in our area anywhere near that. I think our biggest football league is probably 400 kids. So we didn't have anything like that. So the point is, don't do that. It's a recipe for disaster. The board members of that football league or that baseball league or whatever you're booking, if you do a bad job, that is going to follow you from the baseball league to the football league because the coaches, the board members, these are all volunteer parents. These are parents that are engaged with their kids' lives. They're volunteering and they coach football, they coach baseball. So if you do a bad job in baseball, you're not going to get that football job. So it's going to be really hard to get back into that league and into another league. Sometimes it'll follow you from league to league because, you may play baseball here, but play football over here because that league doesn't offer football, so the point is start small and grow.
Yeah, and also, guys, do not think that you can do this alone. This is not a studio environment where you know, you're just doing one thing at a time. There's a lot of moving parts in doing a league. So make sure you have a full crew. Even the professionals do it that way. And you really have to look at the logistics of your shoot. You know, depending on how many teams, how often they show up, you know, you've got to be ready to be able to take care of that efficiently. So don't put the cart before the horse. Don't book a massive league with only you and one other person. It's not going to work out. Make sure you've got everything figured out. Make sure you have enough crew to handle the job, because when you get to extreme volume, it is extreme. And without a crew that is compatible to that amount of teams, you're in for a disaster that could just bury your business.
And I'll leave you with this. We said it, but this is kind of a recap, is you must have systems to survive. Systems is when you get into what we were considering medium-sized to high volume leagues, the larger leagues, you have to have systems, and that is a must. The most important. I'm gonna say the book that I read that I would recommend that you read is The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. So go get that book, read that book, and you'll come away with a new understanding and a new vantage point of how to look at systems and how to look at your business. And we'll wrap this one up, and hopefully we'll see you in lesson 4 as we continue this
Yeah,
season.
guys, remember always like, share, subscribe down below. The more we can grow this community, the more we can help you guys out. So we look forward to seeing you next week on In Focus.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.